I know that for most of you, this picture is very familiar. But if it wasn't as famous as it is, and I ask you today, what do you see? You would probably say that you see two individuals that are clearly transgressing the rules of social distancing. And here it is. Our perceptions are deeply influenced by our environment. And so, if I ask you right now, what is the symbol of this time? Some of you maybe think of a shofar, but most of us would probably think of a mask. Once again, our perceptions, behavior, and choices are deeply influenced by our environment. So, what does our environment look like? We are experiencing a pandemic. Many of the things that we took for granted last year are out of reach today. Don't hug, don't kiss, don't pass the challah, don't even stand too close. We are fully invested in the enterprise of refraining from, so we don't spread or contract anything. Our tradition deals with contagious things quite a bit. Contagious diseases, social distance, quarantine, and even covering our faces are all things that we know from the Torah. But on the other hand, our tradition is very focused on contagious things from a completely different perspective. And let me tell you that if you are not familiar with the nuance of Jewish tradition in this specific topic, I am sure that you know it from your personal life experience. A few weeks ago, I was speaking with Noga while doing dishes at the end of our day. And she asked me if I was bothered by something. No, I say, Kol keragil, everything is normal. But why do you ask? And she said, well, you seem to be bothered by something. Truth to be told, I was experiencing some anguish. But I didn't even know where that was coming from. I stopped for a moment, tried to think if anything happened to me earlier, and after revising in my head several of the conversations I had that day, I realized that earlier that day, a friend shared with me how frustrated he was when he heard another friend apparently being very unkind with regards to a third friend. I knew all the characters involved in this situation. I was able to imagine the bitterness that triggered the unkind behavior. And of course, I could imagine how badly the receiver of that behavior felt. Now, that's not a big deal, right? But actually, it is a big deal. Negativity, aggression, disregard, rudeness, and unkindness are contagious in both in the harm they cause and also in the behavioral standard that they set. True, you throw a rock into the water and it falls in one place, but the vibrations in the water go in many directions, and you never know where they end. Now, let me share with you a very different experience. A few days ago, I got a Facebook message from someone with whom I'm not often in touch. He reached out to me because he needed a little favor, which I was very happy to try to do. A few days and a few phone calls later, he wrote to me, Nico, thank you so much for going out of your way in this busy time of the year. And before I wrote my answer, I couldn't hold it by having a huge smile in my face. I asked myself, me going out of my way? Me going out of my way? He was my counselor when I was in the youth movement in my shul 28 years ago. I remember we were in a camp at the facility of a sister community, and we were having a massive soccer game In those games, you have 30 people running in each direction of the field, and there are not too many rules. You just try to keep the ball if you are lucky. And my counselor was the star of the game. He was unusually fast, and I watched him running back and forth. At some point, I got hit in my leg, and I was sitting on the ground in pain. I was frustrated and disappointed. I guess that the fact that I couldn't touch a single ball in the entire game added to my feeling miserable. And all of a sudden, I saw him standing by my side. And he said something like, "You got hit, I got you." And God knows how. He literally lifted me and carried me in his hands to the side of the field and sat with me until I felt, at least emotionally, better. And now he's writing to me on Facebook and thanking me for going out of my way. You thank me? I am still grateful to you. It's been 28 years, and I am still filled with gratitude. And then I realized that more than that, for pretty much my entire life as an educator, I have been carrying this idea that it doesn't matter how fast you are running or how central you are to the game. When you see someone in need, it's not that you go out of your way, but rather helping that person becomes your way. And that is because kindness is transcendental and contagious. So, what do we know about contagious things? The word contagious in Hebrew is medabek. Torah speaks about fear as something that is medabek, spreading and contagious. So it is lashon hara, evil speech. But the word contagious is also used in a completely different context. The book of Deuteronomy, in several opportunities, speaks about lidbok ba'Adonai, which is often translated as cleaving to God. The bekut, cleaving, or for the purpose of our conversation, contagiousness, was one of the foundational ideas of the Hasidic movement. And with the time, it became a central value in our Jewish tradition. The Talmud teaches that Rabbi Hama, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says, "What is the meaning of after Yah you shall walk, and him you shall fear, and his commandments you shall keep? Him you shall serve, and to him you shall cleave." Is it even possible for a person to follow the divine presence? Isn't God like a devouring fire, and so human beings cannot approach it? Rabbi Hama explains that we are actually supposed to follow the divine attributes of God. Just as he clothes the naked, so we should clothe the naked. Just as he visits the sick, so should we visit the sick. Just as he consoles the mourners, so we should console the mourner. Just as he buries the dead, so shall we bury the dead. The rabbis explain that the beginning, the middle, at the end of our Torah are defined by acts of loving kindness. It is also all over the place in our High Holidays liturgy. Rav Chesed Be'emet, Asei Imanu Tzedaka B'Chesed. God of abundant loving kindness and truth, treat us with righteous justice and with loving kindness. Chesed is the divine attribute that we want to imitate. And so, the bekud at its best means contracting and being infected and spreading loving kindness. Now, contracting and spreading are words that we are constantly hearing in the context of COVID. In order to slow down and fight that pandemic, washing our hands, wearing a mask, keeping social distance are the things we do. and we pray it will be enough. But this principle is not good enough for the other pandemics that we are dealing with. Our public discourse is becoming more and more vicious and offensive, and in the name of truth, many people feel the legitimacy to act with disregard and rudeness. It happens in politics, in virtual interactions, it happens in our communal interchanges, and so it happens within our families. And it is clear in science that negative behavior is corrosive and that it tends to be contagious. And before you think of anyone else, remember that the main goal of this time of the year is to put a mirror for ourselves. Now, the good news is that negativity isn't the only contagious human behavior. Some physical reactions are surprisingly contagious, like yawning. Smiling is contagious. Laughing is contagious. And I want to argue that kindness is contagious. But more than that we have the responsibility to be mass spreaders of kindness. Let me set it clear. In a society facing the pandemic of corrosive disregard, abuse, vicious public discourse, bullying, and growing apathy, we need kindness. We need kindness to go viral. Now we have a serious problem. Kindness is deeply connected with empathy. And empathy is a declining resource in our society. Professor Jamil Saki from Stanford University explains that according to large-scale surveys, the average American in 2009 was less empathetic than 75% of Americans just 30 years earlier. Now, the good news, he explains, is that empathy isn't a trait, but rather a skill that we can train and a resource that can be renewed. So practical debekud, as we say, is loving kindness. And in order to go with loving kindness, we have to exercise the muscle of empathy. The psalmist says, Mi ha'isha chafetz chaim, who is the human being who loves life? Netzor leshonecha mira, usfatecha midaber mirma, the one who refrains from evil. And by evil, we mean vicious and corrosive negativity that has become almost normal in our interactions. But then he says, sur mira, refraining from evil, or not spreading negativity, is just not enough. You should also accept of. You shall do good. We shall spread goodness. Bakesh shalom berodfeu, which you can read as ask for peace, but also as require integrity from yourself. Even if 5 minutes ago you didn't manage to surmira, to refrain from unkindness, right now, in this moment, in your next interaction, you might have the ability of cleaving to that connection. This is about small deeds that make a big difference. Let me invite you to reflect on 5 principles that we can apply to our lives in order to practice empathy and increase kindness. Number 1, walking toward. When you see a homeless person, should you cross the street to avoid him or rather pay attention to his pain? When you recognize a painful situation, don't let your discomfort guide you in the opposite direction, but rather ask yourself how you can be of help. Number 2, practice engagement. When you recognize people who disagree with you, instead of being dismissive, try to understand why they feel the way they do. Number 3, bless and pray for people. Out loud or silently, articulate attentive, wishful words. Number 4, recognize the positive in the other. Our tradition teaches us that each being has a special gift. Remind people that they are gifted and they are valued. And remind to yourself as well. Number 5, give generously and don't expect reward. Don't sit and wait for feedback for your actions. Remember that your reward is the contribution itself. Kindness matters. Our tradition recognizes kindness as a fundamental pillar of this world. On Rosh Hashana, we pray, we say, Hayom Arat Haolam. Today, the universe, our world, is pregnant with opportunity. While we know that our challenges and illnesses are many, we can fight this pandemic. We started by saying that our perceptions and choices are deeply influenced by our environment. So it is on us to start shaping that environment. We have the skill to bring healing and to become carriers and spreaders of kindness and well-being. And so, we pray for the bekut, for connection. We pray for empathy and purpose. We pray for healing and sweetness. We pray for the strength to refrain, to surmira, and for the strength to bring on and to become the change that we want to see. We pray for our actions of goodness to go viral. And we pray for this year to be a very, very good year. Shana Tova Umetuka.